Hello and welcome back to Practical Knife Reviews. As you can see, today we have a few knives out. We're going to focus on one of them, but these are all from the same brand, and so we figured that we would highlight a few that we had from this brand. And it's a brand that most of you are probably pretty familiar with, and that would be Opinel, made in Savoie, France. Opinel is a company that's been around since 1890. And they've been made in the Savoie region of France ever since 1890. And these days, they're one of the top selling brands of knives in the world. They sell about 15 million knives a year, which is something like one every 10 seconds or something like that every day for the entire year. Now, Opinel offers knives in both carbon steel. These are all carbon steel because I'm kind of a carbon steel nut. They offer knives in both carbon steel and in stainless steel. Their carbon steel is XC90, which is more or less like 1086 steel, carbon steel, whereas their stainless steels are Sandvik 12C27M, which is just a Swedish stainless steel. They're both nice steels, definitely more than adequate for what you would need for everyday usage, and these are all really affordable knives. Here we have, well, I guess first we'll talk about the sizing of these knives. So of the folding knives, they have sizes 2 through 12 minus number 11. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. And those go up, the numbers increase as the knife gets bigger. And here we have 3 different examples. So this little one is the smallest one they make. This is the number 2. And you can see how little this is, but it's made the exact same way as the other ones except for one feature, which is the numbers 2 through 5 don't have a lock, they're just a friction folder. Whereas the sizes 6 and up, they also make a 13, but that's kind of like a parody knife more than a knife that people would normally get. But the sizes 6 and up have a ring lock around the neck. So this ring lock, which they called the Vibra lock, was invented in 1955. Back in 1955, it was only for locking the blade in its open configuration like this. You can see how this works. It just spins and holds the blade open. But in 2000, they updated the lock so that it also locks in the closed position. So even if your pin was really loose in there and the blade didn't have much friction to holding it shut, you'd be able to make sure that it wasn't going to open your pocket or anything like that. And we also brought out a couple of paring knives just because, well, these are nice paring knives. And you can see they're from the same set. I got them at the same time. This one has been maintained pretty well. That's just natural patina on there from use. Whereas this one, somebody left it in the sink for a while, and with it being carbon steel, well, I got some rust on it, which came right off with vinegar, but it's almost got like a cool, you can see it's almost got like an interesting Damascus-like pattern on it, which of course, not ideal how we got it, but it still works fine. So Matt, before we do any of the measurements or anything like that, you're pretty familiar with Opinels. You've had a number 8, one just like this, in your purse for a few years now. What do you think of Opinels generally?
I like it. The blade is super thin, so it makes the whole knife very lightweight, but I do like the locking mechanism. It's easy to open, which I always struggle to open every knife that's a folding knife. It's easy to open, and then I feel comfortable and secure that it's locked in place with that roll mechanism. Sure.
So also to mention, these all have beechwood handles. All of their standard knives have the beechwood handles. They have fancier ones that have ebony wood or babinga and etc. Those are more expensive, but I guess I'll just show you these ones. This one, it's patinaed from use and whatnot. Also, I forced this one a little bit. There was a little bit of rust on it, so I put it into vinegar, which darkened it a little bit. This one is a completely natural patina, and that's because this was my everyday carry knife in Germany for about 3 years. It was in my pocket every day. This is a number 7, this is a number 8. but the carbon steel versions all have a varnished beechwood handle, whereas the stainless steel versions have an unfinished beechwood handle. I guess they figured that you didn't need that extra bit of waterproofing to prevent the blade from rusting. But I'm going to do the cut tests first, just so I can move some of these out of the way for the measurements. We're going to test the number 8 because that's what we're going to do the rest of the review on, plus one of the paring knives just for the heck of it. So say goodbye to the number 2, just until we measure anyway. So we've got our paper. Always harder to do on camera, but you can see I had sharpened this relatively recently, and just look how thin that is behind the edge there. It's such a thin, slicey blade. And the paring knives likewise have just a super, super thin edge behind the blade and are just thin overall. And likewise, you can get these really, really screaming sharp. So let's take a quick look at how this does on cardboard, because as we mentioned, every time cardboard is something that we have to cut a lot in our everyday lives. So if you were carrying this as a EDC, it's something that you could very likely be cutting through. And well, there you pretty much have it. There's almost no resistance as it goes through. Super sharp, super thin behind the edge. So really suited to going through that thick cardboard. And let's try the paring knife just for the heck of it. Also, almost no resistance at all as we go through there. So these knives are really, really exceptionally slicey knives. Let's get some measurements now before we go and do some outdoor tests. We'll measure the 8, the 2, and the paring knife. The 7 is pretty close. You were able to see the difference in size. But if I measure every single one, it's going to take a long time. You can see it's just a little bit longer. It's about, I guess we'll measure it. Why not? The 7 open is exactly 7 inches long. What do you know? The blade is just a smidge over 3 inches long. Whereas the 8 is about 7 3/4 inches long, and the blade is just a smidge under 3.5 inches long. The 2, just close these to make sure I don't mess up anything, like myself. The 2 is just a hair over 3 inches long. That's about 3 1/8 with a blade of about 1.5 inches long. And the paring knives, which I'll mention the price in just a second. The paring knives are just a smidge over 7.5 inches long, maybe 7 5/8, with a cutting edge of about 3 5/8 of an inch long. So before we do the weight, I just don't want to forget to mention the price. The 7 I got for about $11. The 8 I got for about $12. The 2 I don't know the price of because it was a gift from my parents. But I mean, it was probably what, like $6 or $7 or something like that. And the paring knives came in a set of 2. It was 2 for, I think, €9.50 or something like that when I got them. So it was about $11 for both paring knives. So these standard Opinels are super, super affordable. You don't want to say cheap because they just work. They work amazingly. But they are very, very affordable. So now let's get some weight measurements. We'll start with the paring knife. It is 25 grams, which is 0.9 ounces. It's not even 1 ounce. Needless to say, that makes it quite easy to maneuver in the kitchen. The number 2, 0.1 ounce. The grams will be a little bit better here. It's 5 grams. It's like holding nothing at all. The 7, 36 grams, which is 1.2 ounces. And the 8, 1.8 ounces, which is 49 grams. So these are all really lightweight knives. incredibly slicey, pretty good steel. All of these, the XC90 and the Sandvik 12C27M are both really good steels, especially for being in the sub $20 range for all of these. So now we're going to take these outside to do some outdoor tests. Ma, is there anything else that you want to say before we go out there?
Those are available in stainless steel?
They're available in stainless steel and carbon steel. The stainless is 12C27M, which is a Swedish stainless steel, whereas the carbon steel, which these all are, just because I'm a carbon steel guy, are XC90, which is a French carbon steel, about the equivalent of 1086.
See, for the mothers though, stainless steel would be better, so we didn't get the critique by the son for lack of care of the blade.
For leaving the carbon steel in the sink, that is, and letting it rust. So yes, that is possible, but I really do like their carbon steel. But now with the indoor part out of the way, we'll take this outside and do some stuff out there. So now we've got the Opinel. Before we looked at the 2, the 7, the 8, and the paring knives, but for these tests we're just going to do the 8 because it cuts identically to the 7, and the paring knives, they're just nice paring knives. This is more of a EDC kind of knife. So we're going to do something that is done fairly frequently with Opinels, which is to peel an apple. And we're going to have the caveat that we have every time, that I'm not a great apple peeler because I like to eat the peel. But for these, on the days that we do these reviews, the chipmunks get a little treat and they get to eat the peel, and the chipmunks go crazy for the peel. But what I can say is that the thinness of the blade makes it really easy to get right under the skin. You can see how close to the skin I am underneath it. Oop, broke through right there, but you're able to get really, really shallow because of how thin the knife blade is. And so if you were somebody who is adept at peeling, this is a nice slicey knife that would do a good job at peeling your apples for you. I'm just not particularly great at peeling apples, but even I am able to get these nice long ribbons of apple peel off. But set that down so I can eat that in a little bit. And now we'll look how it does with some woodwork, just in case you were out camping and this is the knife you've got. So let's see, here's a piece of pine, softwood. Let's see how we feather stick. Got to plane off that outer piece. And it is incredibly easy to get under the surface there. The problem that I'm having, and it's the problem I've had basically every time I've tried to feather stick with an Opinel, is that the blade is so thin that it wants to just dig in deeper than you actually want it. So you're having to consciously try to keep it very surface level, because it's such a thin blade. It's so slicey that it wants to just keep slicing. But you're able to go without almost any effort to get under. So you can see these aren't the best curls, but they're very easy to make. And I'm sure other people will have more success at making nice curls of wood than I am currently. I mean, if you really, really just tried to get just under the surface, you'd probably be able to curl it better. But, I mean, you're able to do quick feather sticking like this. It digs in really quick. So, there's pine. Now, let's take a look at red oak. This is the hardest wood that we've got in our forests here. And you can see with this harder wood, it's actually a little bit easier to get, well, not great curls per se, but to get really thin pieces of wood. And that's because the wood is putting up some resistance to the blade and it's not letting the blade just dig in really deep immediately. But it still is going quite easy. I mean, red oak is a hard wood. And we're able to get, if I use towards the tip, I was getting some nice curls over here. But we're able to get in under the surface really easily. So maybe not the best feather sticker in the world, but if you were gonna have a fire, you definitely could use this to get your fire prepped. So any comments on this before we take it inside and look at how it works on food? Because traditionally Opinels were the picnic knife in France. So we're gonna take a look at how it cuts through some soft cheese and some meat and some onions, just for the sake of showing you guys how a kitchen knife would do the kitchen type tasks. But do you have any thoughts on the Opinel before we go in and do that, Ma?
No, it reminds me of, I don't even remember where it was, but where they were eating peas with their knife. I can envision that this knife is that old that when somebody didn't have other cutlery, that they were just using their knives to eat.
Yeah, and like I said, this knife was invented in 1890, and the design has really not changed significantly since then. And they make 15 million a year. Or sell 15 million a year. It's an absolute classic and something that's going to remain probably exactly as it is for many decades or more to come. So now let's take it inside and see how it does on different food preparation. So one of the more common uses of Opinels, and again this is the number 8 in carbon steel. One of the more common uses of Opinels is as a picnic knife. It's the quintessential picnic knife in France and as well as a lot of other places in Europe. So it's about to be cooking time, and while we would typically use an actual cooking knife, for the purposes of this demonstration, figured it would be a good idea to get some in-use video of this Opinel. So the cheese is not going in the recipe, but you know, we're from basically Wisconsin, so we're gonna have a slice of cheese just to eat as a little appetizer for our meal. So this is some nice onion cheese. Whoops, butchered that piece. This is a bit softer of a cheese than you would typically be slicing, but here's for you, Ma.
Okay.
And then we're gonna go into cutting up stuff for the recipe. Which there's no recipe, I'm just making it off the top of my head. Pretty good, nice and oniony. Okay, move this out of the way. So, again, this wouldn't typically be for like full-size kitchen work, but this should demonstrate that you can use it for kitchen work, or if you happen to bring onions to a picnic, I guess, or let's say you were going out to your little cabin in the forest or a beach house or something like that, and you didn't keep a full cooking set there. You could use an Opinel for that kind of thing as well, but yeah, it would mostly be for like hard cheeses and fruits and stuff like that. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll do it on the onion and the meat. I'm just going to be trimming the fat off of the meat. We're not doing anything really fancy with it because it's just a roast.
What size Opinel is this?
This is a number 8, so just bigger than the halfway size. I would say halfway would be about a 7. The numbers go 2 through 13. The number 13 is like a comedy sized one. It's just hang on, we're filming. The 13 is basically a comedy-sized one. It's like 3 feet long or something like that. It's basically a sword. But the normal-sized ones go 2. They used to have 1 through 12, but they stopped making the 1 because it was just so small. So the 2 is really tiny. You'll have seen it at the beginning of this video. And I believe the number, I want to say the number 11 is skipped, either the 10 or the 11, but I'll have already mentioned that in this video. We're filming this non-chronologically just because I thought that this would be a nice little demonstration. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, cross-contamination in the kitchen is an issue that we face every day as consumers of food. But for this recipe, it's not actually going to matter because the onion's going into the pot first and the meat is going in the same pot. So cross-contamination here of the onions with the meat is not going to be an issue. So actually, I'll put that off to the side because you don't need to watch the whole cooking process, but we'll just see how we do at cutting off the fat off this meat. Because, Mom, you can tell them how much you like fat in your food.
Yeah, I don't like fat in my food. I trim everything to be very lean.
So how does this look like it's going, Ma?
That looks like it's cutting better than most of my kitchen knives, except of course the few that you've sharpened to unbelievable sharpness.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see how thin this blade is, and look at how thick it is behind the edge. It's thin. So even if you didn't have it sharpened incredibly sharp, you will be able to slice pretty well. This is a super, super slicey knife with a super, super slicey edge. But this piece can just get ripped off. That's that hard fat. But when you have it actually sharpened well, it makes cutting through anything super easy.
Although we save the fat here because we have some friends
Oh
in the
yeah,
forest.
there's some nice little foxes and stuff like that that like to eat the fat, so we always give that to them, except when the dog's at the house, and then she gets a little bit of the trimmings for herself.
Oh, we cook them up for her.
Cook for the dog, yeah. The fox doesn't require that kind of attention, but yeah, we can see that this is going through quite easily. We're not going to film the whole cooking process. You get the idea. The cheese was a poor example of a cheese that you would be using an Opinel on because that was a really soft cheese. But on meat, we're going right through, and on the onions also. I mean, if you've cut onions before, you know if the knife is not really sharp, it's not very easy to dice onions. So to get a nice dice on this with a really short blade like this, it's a sharp and slicey knife. So for kitchen/picnic work, this is definitely a knife to look into using. And now for the final part of the review for the Opinel, we're going to have what does a rickety rat say about it? Because this is her last day here. So this is the last knife that she's going to get to review with us. So what do you think of the Opinel, Rick? Well, she likes it. You like that, huh? Oh, yeah. Real nice. Well, that'll just about do it for the Opinel. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again on the channel soon.